A knight's chainmail could not stop a warhammer's brutal force. This single weakness sparked a technological arms race that reshaped medieval Europe. The transformation from chainmail to plate armor was a revolution in survival, altering the fate of warriors and the very nature of combat itself. By the end of this story, you will understand exactly how this engineering marvel saved lives and forged the iconic knight in shining armor we remember today. We will uncover why this shift was so urgent, how blacksmiths achieved the impossible, and what hidden vulnerabilities remained even in a full steel shell. What does it truly take to build a second skin of steel? That familiar clinking sound of chainmail was the soundtrack of an era. For centuries, a long shirt of interlocking iron rings, known as a hauberk, was the best personal defense a warrior could hope for. Think of it not as a rigid shell, but as a flexible metal fabric draped over the body. This design was its greatest strength. A warrior could mount a horse, swing a sword, and move with a freedom that heavier armor would later compromise. Against the slashing arc of a common sword, it was remarkably effective. The mesh of rings would spread the energy of a cut across a wide area, often preventing the blade from breaking through the skin beneath. It was a masterpiece of distributed defense, a technological marvel for its time, but the battlefield is a brutal innovator, and it soon presented threats that chainmail simply could not handle. The focused point of a bodkin arrow or a couched lance could punch through the rings as if they were cloth. Even more terrifying was the blunt force from a mace or a warhammer. The mail might remain unbroken, but the rings would be driven violently into the body, transferring all that crushing energy into broken bones and internal injuries. Contemporary chroniclers like Jean Froissart left us vivid, often grim, accounts of knights being struck down, their mail intact but their bodies shattered within. This was the terrifying reality that defined the limits of chainmail. Its reign was ending, not because it was a bad technology, but because the weapons facing it had become too powerful. The search for a new kind of armor, one that could turn a direct blow rather than just absorb it, was no longer a matter of advantage. It was a matter of survival. This escalating threat forced a complete rethinking of battlefield protection. The battlefield itself was transforming, shifting from chaotic individual duels to vast, organized engagements where disciplined formations held the power. At the heart of this change were two revolutionary missile weapons, the crossbow and the longbow. A skilled longbowman could launch a heavy arrow with enough force to penetrate chainmail at a startling distance, turning a knight into a vulnerable target long before he could even engage. The crossbow, with its mechanical advantage, fired a bolt with such concentrated power that it could punch through iron rings as if they were parchment. Suddenly, the safest place on the field was no longer atop a warhorse, but within a shield wall or a dense block of infantry armed with long, deadly polearms. These new formations presented a forest of sharpened steel, a wall of spears and halberds that could unhorse a charging knight and deliver crushing, piercing blows from every direction. Chainmail, designed for the slashing swords of a bygone era, was utterly overwhelmed by this new reality. The evidence for this failure is written into the history of conflicts like the 100 Years' War, where chronicles detail the horrific casualties suffered by heavily mailed French knights at the hands of English longbowmen. These were not isolated incidents, but systemic failures that exposed a fatal gap in a warrior's defense. The age of the individual champion was giving way to the age of the collective army, and survival now demanded a suit of armor that could turn a direct hit, not just soften a glancing blow. The race was on to build a defense that could match this new, more deadly form of warfare. So the challenge was now clear: How do you build a suit that can stop a crossbow bolt without imprisoning the warrior inside? The answer was not found on the battlefield, but in the fiery heart of the forge. This was a metallurgical leap, a moment when the blacksmith's ancient art transformed into a precise and demanding science. The first steps were cautious, almost like testing the water. Blacksmiths began adding simple plates of wrought iron to the existing chainmail hauberk. A knight might strap on solid greaves to protect his shins from sweeping cuts, or counters to shield his elbows during a fall. This wrought iron was malleable and easy to work with, but it was also soft. A determined blow from an axe could dent it deeply, and the focused point of a weapon could still punch right through. It was an improvement, but hardly a revolution. The true breakthrough, the one that made the iconic suit of plate armor possible, was the mastery of steel. Steel is, in essence, iron refined with a precise amount of carbon. This simple-sounding addition changes everything. It gives the metal a dual personality, a combination of hardness and resilience that wrought iron could never achieve. A blacksmith needed a plate that was hard enough on its surface to deflect a spear tip or shatter the point of an arrow. But if the plate was too hard, it became brittle, and a powerful blow from a mace would cause it to crack like glass. The solution was as brilliant as it was difficult. Smiths learned to carefully heat a finished steel plate until it glowed a specific, critical color, and then plunge it into a bath of water or oil. This process, known as quenching, instantaneously cools the metal, locking in an incredibly hard outer surface. But the magic did not stop there. They would then gently reheat the plate to a lower temperature in a process called tempering. This step relieved the internal stresses, giving the steel a softer, more flexible core behind that hardened shell. The result was a plate that could take a direct hit, resist penetration, and absorb the shock without shattering. It was a material perfectly tailored to the brutal physics of the medieval battlefield. Achieving this consistency required more than just skill. It demanded vast resources. Producing high-quality steel relied on access to pure iron ore and the intense, controlled heat of advanced bloomery furnaces. This turned armor production into a centralized, specialized craft. The best armor did not come from a village smithy, but from renowned workshops in cities like Milan and Augsburg, where generations of smiths honed their secrets. The ability to work with steel reliably was the final, fundamental enabler. It moved the craft beyond simply reinforcing chainmail to the audacious goal of full-body encapsulation. This was no longer just adding a few extra pieces. It was about engineering a complete exoskeleton, a second skin of steel that could redefine the very limits of human survival in combat. But how do you take these perfected plates of steel and engineer them into a suit that allows a knight to actually move and fight? The true genius of the first plate armor lay in its pragmatism. It was not a sudden, revolutionary leap to a full steel shell, but a careful, piecemeal evolution. Blacksmiths, responding to the urgent pleas of knights on the battlefield, began with a simple principle: protect the most vital areas first. The chest, back, and shoulders became the primary targets for these early reinforcements. The most widespread and crucial innovation from this period was the coat of plates. Imagine what looked like a simple fabric surcoat, but hidden on the inside were dozens of small, overlapping steel plates, riveted securely to the cloth or leather backing. A knight would wear this over his chainmail hauberk, creating a layered defense that was both flexible and incredibly resilient. The outer fabric distributed the force of a blow across multiple plates, while the individual steel segments prevented penetration. It was a clever disguise, a suit of armor hiding in plain sight. The brutal effectiveness of this design is chillingly preserved in the archaeological record. On the island of Gotland, the mass grave from the Battle of Visby, fought in 1361, reveals the stark difference between protected and unprotected bodies. Skeletons of soldiers wearing coats of plates show clear evidence of deflected sword strikes and stopped arrows on their torsos, while their limbs, still clad only in chainmail, bear the terrible wounds of penetrating attacks. This was not theoretical improvement, it was proven survival. These transitional armors represent a critical phase of experimentation, a constant negotiation between the blacksmith's anvil and the warrior's need to move. Every added plate was a calculated risk, a trade-off between security and the ability to swing a weapon or mount a horse. The lessons learned from these composite designs, from how to articulate plates at the joints to how to distribute weight across the body, became the foundational knowledge for the next, more ambitious step. The goal was no longer just to reinforce chainmail, but to replace it entirely with an interlocking system of steel, a true exoskeleton that could turn a knight into a fortress on the move. These two philosophies of protection eventually crystallized into two dominant schools of thought, the Italian Milanese and the German Gothic. In the bustling workshops of Milan, armorers perfected a style built for resilience. A Milanese harness was a statement of brute confidence characterized by its smooth, rounded surfaces. Every piece, from the broad breastplate to the bulbous helmet known as the armet, was designed with a single purpose: to guide an enemy's weapon point harmlessly away from the body. The ideal was a glancing blow, a sword tip sliding off a curved pauldron or a lance head skittering across a polished convex surface. This emphasis on deflection often came with a trade-off in weight, creating a suit that was supremely protective but also incredibly demanding on the wearer's stamina. It was armor for the knight who expected to withstand a brutal, direct assault. Meanwhile, north of the Alps, a different aesthetic and engineering ideal was taking shape. The German Gothic style, born in cities like Augsburg and Nuremberg, looked less like a solid shell and more like an architectural marvel in steel. Its most distinctive feature was fluting, a series of parallel ridges and grooves that covered the entire surface. This was far more than mere decoration. Each flute acted like a structural rib, dramatically increasing the plate's resistance to bending or denting without adding a single ounce of extra metal. The result was a suit that was remarkably light and flexible for its level of protection, allowing for a greater range of motion. The sharply pointed sabatons on the feet and the elegant, angular lines of the gauntlets were not just for show. They were a testament to a culture that valued precision engineering and breathtaking artistry in equal measure. This was not a quiet evolution, it was a fierce and productive competition. A German knight might commission a suit from Italy to showcase his wealth and worldliness, while an Italian noble might import a Gothic harness for its lightweight agility in a tournament. This cross-pollination of ideas pushed workshops to constantly innovate, blending defensive principles with an almost obsessive pursuit of perfection. The armorers of this golden age were not just blacksmiths, they were master engineers and artists, creating a second skin that was as much a symbol of cultural identity as it was a tool for survival. Yet, even this pinnacle of craftsmanship had to answer to the most demanding critic of all, the human body in motion. How do you engineer a steel shell to move with the fluidity of a seasoned warrior? A full harness was a symphony of steel, with every piece playing a critical role in a unified defense. Let us begin with the body's core, the cuirass. This was the central fortress of the entire suit, a two-part shell comprising the breastplate and backplate that encased the torso. Its smooth, rounded shape was no accident. Every curve was a calculated design to deflect a lance point or an arrowhead away from the wearer's vital organs. Attached to this core were the defenses for the limbs, a system of interlocking plates that moved with the warrior. The upper arm was protected by the rerebrace, the elbow by a sculpted counter, and the forearm by the vambrace. This careful segmentation was the secret to its flexibility, but perhaps the most ingenious pieces were the pauldrons guarding the shoulders. These were not simple caps, but often large, layered assemblies that curved over the joint like the scales of a mythical beast, offering protection without blocking the powerful swings of a sword or axe. This engineering brilliance reached its peak at the joints. A knight's armor could not have simple holes for bending. It needed articulated connections that mirrored the human body itself. Look at a kneecap or polin. It was not one solid piece of metal. Instead, it was constructed from multiple, slender horizontal plates called lames. These lames overlapped each other like the slats in a window blind, connected by internal leather straps or a special type of rivet that allowed them to slide smoothly against one another. This system permitted the knight to bend his knee or elbow almost as freely as if he were wearing heavy leather. The same principle was applied at the hips, the ankles, and even within the gauntlets, allowing the fingers to grip a rein or a weapon. This was the heart of the armorer's art, transforming a potential steel prison into a mobile, responsive exoskeleton. No piece of the harness evolved more dramatically than the helmet. The early bassinet was an open-faced helmet that offered good visibility but left the face exposed, a risk that led to the addition of a removable visor. The great helm was a massive, fully enclosing cylinder of steel that offered supreme protection in a knightly charge but was stifling and limited both vision and breath. The ultimate solution was the armet. This was a masterpiece of mechanics, consisting of two cheek pieces that swung open on hinges at the sides, allowing the knight to put the helmet on easily before locking them securely in place under the chin. A single visor, also hinged, could be raised for air and conversation, or lowered to present a smooth, impenetrable face to the enemy. It offered the near-total security of the great helm with the practical utility of the bassinet. To wear a full harness was to inhabit a personal fortress, one that moved with you, its plates whispering and shifting with every step. This was the pinnacle of medieval craftsmanship, a perfect fusion of art, science, and the relentless demand for survival. A knight sealed within his steel shell was anything but a clumsy tin man. The popular image of an immobilized warrior, hoisted onto his horse by a crane, is a fiction invented centuries later, a comical misunderstanding of the armor's true nature. The reality was a system of such sophisticated engineering that it granted the wearer a freedom of movement that can still astonish us today. A complete suit of plate armor weighed between 45 and 55 pounds, a significant load, but one that was carried with brilliant efficiency. Unlike a modern soldier's backpack, which concentrates weight on the shoulders, the harness distributed its burden across the entire body, from the broad pauldrons on the shoulders down to the greaves on the shins. The weight was carried on the hips and thighs, balanced so perfectly that a knight in a properly fitted harness could run, leap, and even vault into his saddle without any assistance at all. Modern historians and dedicated reenactors have proven this beyond doubt, performing roles, climbing ladders, and executing the precise, powerful movements of medieval combat manuals. They can swing a great sword, lie flat on the ground to aim a crossbow, and rise again with a fluidity that shatters the old myth. The secret to this mobility lay in the very design of the articulated plates. Each major joint was a masterpiece of mechanical mimicry. The internal leather straps that held the plates to the arming doublet, the padded garment worn beneath, allowed the steel to move with the body, not against it. The overlapping lames at the knees and elbows slid smoothly over one another, permitting a near-complete range of motion. This was not a rigid cage, it was a responsive exoskeleton. This incredible mobility was a devastating tactical advantage. A knight was not a slow, predictable target. He was a versatile and dynamic combatant. On foot, he could engage lightly armored infantry with powerful, sweeping attacks, his armor allowing him to recover quickly from a missed swing. In a melee, he could turn and pivot to meet threats from any direction, his defense moving with him seamlessly. The true challenge of wearing plate armor was not a lack of movement, but a sheer lack of stamina. The incredible weight, combined with the stifling heat trapped inside the steel shell, turned every minute of combat into a test of endurance. A knight in a full harness was like a champion athlete performing at peak exertion while carrying a heavy, metal-weighted suit. Exhaustion was the real enemy, a creeping weakness that could make strong arms heavy and clear thinking foggy, leaving a warrior vulnerable long before his armor ever failed. That steel fortress came with a price tag as staggering as its defensive power. Think not in terms of a simple purchase, but of commissioning a masterpiece. A single, complete suit of plate armor represented a financial outlay so vast it is difficult to comprehend today. This was not the cost of a family car. It was the equivalent of buying a private jet or a multi-million-dollar supercar. The price was built from the ground up, starting with the raw materials. High-quality steel was not cheaply produced. It required specific iron ore and the sustained, intense heat of advanced furnaces, a process that consumed vast quantities of charcoal and demanded expert oversight. But the true cost lay in the labor. A master armorer, a man at the absolute peak of his craft, would not work alone. He led a team of skilled apprentices in a workshop filled with specialized tools, from anvils of different shapes to precise hammers and files. Creating a single, custom-fitted harness was a process that could consume 3, 6, even 9 months of continuous, painstaking work. Every curved plate had to be hammered into shape, heat-treated for the perfect balance of hardness and flexibility, and then articulated with its neighbors in a system of moving parts. This was not mass production, it was bespoke engineering of the highest order. So, what did this mean in real terms? Surviving financial records from the period are telling. The cost of a full harness could easily equal the entire annual income of a large, prosperous farm, or even the value of a small estate with its land and manor house. For a common soldier or a peasant, such a sum was an impossible fantasy, more money than they would see in a lifetime. This immense economic barrier made plate armor the ultimate status symbol. It was a visible, tangible declaration that its wearer existed in the highest echelons of society, a nobleman or an exceptionally successful mercenary captain. Your armor was your resume, written in polished steel. This connection between wealth and survival fundamentally reinforced the feudal hierarchy. A knight, already born into land and privilege, could afford the protection that kept him alive to maintain that power. The armor itself became a canvas for displaying this wealth. Beyond the functional shape, you would see exquisite decoration, fine etching that swirled across the surface, delicate gilding with real gold leaf, and elaborate embossing that raised scenes of saints or mythical beasts from the metal itself. This was not mere vanity, it was a deliberate statement. It proclaimed that the wearer was so powerful, so secure, that he could dedicate immense resources to beauty as well as defense. For a long time, the revolutionary survival advantage offered by full plate armor was a privilege locked behind a gate of pure gold, a technological marvel reserved for the elite few who could command the labor of master artisans and the wealth of nations. The forge was the true birthplace of the knight's steel skin. This was not a single room with one hammer and anvil, but a bustling workshop that functioned like a small, highly specialized factory. Within its soot-stained walls, a team of craftsmen, each a master of a specific task, collaborated to transform raw steel into a mobile fortress. The process began with the forgers, powerful individuals who hammered the rough bars of metal into the basic curves of a breastplate or a greave over large, specially shaped anvils. Next, the grinders took over, using water-powered wheels and abrasive stones to smooth away the hammer marks, refining the shape and preparing the surface for its final, mirror-like polish. Meanwhile, the locksmith, a precision metalworker, focused on the smallest yet most crucial components, the intricate hinges for a visor, the secure latches for a gauntlet, and the tiny rivets that would hold the entire articulated system together. This division of labor was essential, ensuring that every aspect of the harness met an exacting standard. The true magic, the moment that transformed simple steel into a life-saving material, happened during heat treatment. The master armorer himself would oversee this delicate operation. He would heat a finished piece in the charcoal fire, watching the color of the metal with an experienced eye. It was not a process governed by a thermometer, but by instinct and generations of accumulated knowledge. He waited for that precise shade of cherry red, a color that signaled the steel was ready, before commanding an apprentice to plunge the glowing plate into a trough of water or oil. This quenching created an incredibly hard, glass-like surface, but one that was also dangerously brittle. To remedy this, the smith would gently reheat the metal, tempering it to a lower temperature to draw back some of that brittleness and introduce a vital resilience. The goal was a perfect balance, a plate hard enough to shatter a sword point but flexible enough to absorb a mace blow without cracking. With the metallurgy complete, the final, most personal phase began, the fitting. A knight did not simply order a medium or a large. Using a wooden mannequin carved to the client's exact dimensions and a series of meticulous measurements, the armorers would painstakingly adjust each piece. They would check the range of motion at the elbow, the way the pauldrons sat on the shoulders, and how the cuirass encased the torso without restricting breathing. This obsessive attention to ergonomics is what separated a masterpiece from a mobile prison. Because of this bespoke process, no two suits of armor were ever identical. Each harness was a unique collaboration between the warrior's body and the smith's skill, a testament to individual identity forged in steel. These workshops were not just production lines, they were vibrant centers of research and development, where every new dent on a battlefield-tested suit provided data, and every client's feedback fueled a cycle of constant, incremental improvement in the eternal pursuit of perfect protection. That perfected steel shell did not mark the end of conflict, but the beginning of a new arms race. The near-impenetrable defense of plate armor forced every weaponsmith and warrior on the battlefield to completely rethink their craft. Swords, the iconic knightly weapon, underwent a radical transformation. The classic broad-bladed arming sword, perfect for slashing against chainmail, was now almost useless, its edge glancing harmlessly off curved steel plates. In its place emerged new designs built for precision, not power. The estoc was a pure expression of this new reality, a sword that abandoned a cutting edge entirely. It was essentially a long, stiff, triangular sectioned spike, designed for one purpose only: to be gripped with both hands and thrust with pinpoint accuracy into the vulnerable gaps at the armpit or the visor's sight. The versatile longsword, which could be used in one or two hands, also evolved, featuring a sharply tapered point that could exploit these same openings while still being capable of devastating cuts against less protected opponents. When a solid blow would not work, warriors turned to the brutal physics of concentrated force. Impact weapons like the mace and the warhammer saw a massive surge in popularity. These were not elegant weapons, they were tools of pure trauma. A heavy, spiked war hammerhead swung with force did not need to pierce the steel. Its goal was to transfer kinetic energy directly through the plate, denting the metal inward to break bones or deliver a severe, armor-piercing concussion to the man inside. This deadly innovation reached its peak with the poleaxe, a weapon that combined a hammer or axe head on one side, a spike on the other, and often a long, thrusting spike on top. It was a can opener for knights, a multi-tool designed to crush, hook, and puncture its way through a steel harness. This new reality gave birth to a specialized and brutally efficient martial art, known in German as Kampfringen or armored combat. This was not the wide, swinging swordplay of Hollywood. It was a form of close-quarters battle that looked more like wrestling. knights trained to close the distance, grab their opponent, and use leverage and their own weapons to throw them to the ground. Once an armored man was on his back, his mobility was severely compromised, and his attacker could use a dagger, known as a misericord, to finish the fight by sliding its narrow blade through a vision slit or into an unprotected underarm. This constant duel between defense and offense is a perfect example of a military technological feedback loop. Each improvement in armor spurred a corresponding innovation in weaponry, which in turn pushed armorers to refine their designs once more. The knight in his shining fortress was not an unstoppable force, but a single point in an endless cycle of attack and countermeasure. A cycle that would soon face its greatest challenge from a weapon that could kill from 1,000 paces away. A polished steel visor showed no fear, no anger, no human emotion at all. Staring down a line of these silent, faceless warriors was like confronting an army of machines, an experience that could paralyze an unprepared soldier with dread. This was the psychological core of plate armor, a weapon as potent as any sword. On a sunlit field, a cavalry charge was not just a physical assault, it was a terrifying spectacle. The sun glinted off dozens of mirror-like surfaces, a blinding wall of advancing light. The air filled with a deafening, metallic roar, the collective thunder of shifting plates and pounding hooves that sounded less like an army and more like an approaching tempest. For a peasant levy holding a spear, this overwhelming sensory attack could shatter his resolve long before the first knight reached his line. The armor deliberately dehumanized the wearer, transforming a man into an implacable, monstrous entity. Heraldry painted on shields or etched into steel was not just for identification. It was the only hint of identity, a small flash of color on an otherwise impersonal shell. This intimidation was a deliberate tool of warfare. Commanders understood that a broken spirit could lead to a broken army, causing entire formations to waver and flee at the mere sight of an armored advance. For the man inside the steel shell, the experience was utterly different. Encased in that custom-fitted harness, a knight felt a profound sense of security. The constant, reassuring clatter of the plates was the sound of his own survival. He could advance through a hail of arrows that would have felled a lesser protected man, trusting his steel skin to turn aside all but the most fortunate or powerful shots. This confidence was contagious, fostering incredible unit cohesion. A group of armored knights moved with a shared purpose, each man trusting not only his own defense but that of the comrades beside him. This allowed for aggressive, complex tactics that would be unthinkable for troops preoccupied with their own vulnerability. They could hold a formation under missile fire, press a relentless advance, and commit fully to a melee, their morale bolstered by the very metal they wore. The battlefield was a contest of wills as much as a contest of strength, and plate armor was a masterful instrument for dominating both. The roar of the tournament crowd was a sound of celebration, not terror. Here on the jousting lists, the knight's steel shell found a second purpose beyond survival. This was the glittering stage where plate armor evolved from pure protection into a symbol of power, artistry, and political savvy. While the battlefield tested armor against the chaos of death, the tournament provided a controlled laboratory for its refinement. Armorers seized this opportunity to create specialized harnesses built not for the varied threats of war, but for the singular, brutal physics of the joust. A knight's left side, the side perpetually presented to his oncoming opponent, became a focal point of reinforcement. The breastplate on that side, often called a grand guard, was a massively thickened steel shield bolted directly over the standard cuirass. His helmet, too, was frequently a heavier, more enclosed design, sometimes even fixed rigidly to the breastplate to prevent whiplash from the shattering impact of a lance. This was armor pushed to an extreme, sacrificing some general mobility for absolute security in a very specific, repeated event. These tournament suits were far more than just functional. They were a knight's mobile billboard, Elaborate etchings, gilding with real gold, and sculpted crests transformed the steel into a canvas for heraldic pride. A knight was no longer just a man, he was a walking emblem of his family's lineage and honor. When he charged down the list, the sun flashing off his decorated armor, he was performing for an audience of peers, rivals, and the monarch. A victory was not merely a personal triumph, it was a potent political statement, a display of wealth, power, and divine favor that could elevate a family's status for generations. The tournament was theater, and the armor was the most crucial prop. Yet beneath the pageantry, a serious technological exchange was taking place. Every innovation proven in the lists was a potential upgrade for the battlefield. The methods developed to absorb the incredible shock of a lance strike, such as improved internal padding and the way reinforced plates were anchored to the body, directly informed the design of better battlefield harnesses. The relentless testing of articulation at the shoulder under impact led to stronger, more reliable designs for the pauldrons and rerebraces that protected a knight in a melee. The tournament was a vital, high-stakes crucible where armorers could experiment with new shapes, new alloys, and new construction techniques, observing their performance under tremendous stress without the immediate threat of a fatal failure. This symbiotic relationship between the sport of peace and the art of war meant that the spectacle of the joust was secretly one of the most important research and development centers of the medieval age, constantly pushing the steel skin of the knight toward perfection. Even the most perfectly fitted steel shell could not eliminate every vulnerability. A knight's armor was a system of incredible strength, but a system with deliberate, necessary gaps. To move, to breathe, to even see his enemy, the knight had to accept certain points of exposure. The most terrifying of these was the vision slit. Those narrow openings in the visor were a lifeline to the outside world, but they were also a fatal invitation. A skilled opponent would not waste his energy hammering at the solid breastplate. He would instead maneuver for a chance to drive the slender, needle-like point of a rondel dagger straight into that gap. This was not a slashing knife, but a weapon of pure precision, designed to slip through the visor and end the fight in one brutal, intimate motion. Beyond the helmet, other weak points were strategically mapped by every trained warrior. The armpits, especially when a knight raised his arm to strike, were shielded only by a patch of chainmail known as a gusset, sewn into the arming doublet beneath. A thrust from a sword's point or a dagger into this area could sever vital arteries and lead to a swift and certain end. The same principle applied to the inner elbow and the back of the knee, joints that required flexibility and were therefore protected by mail and padding rather than rigid plate. A deep cut to the hamstring could bring a knight crashing to the ground, turning his greatest asset into a deadly liability. How did warriors learn to exploit these microscopic flaws in an otherwise impenetrable defense? The answer lies in the detailed combat manuals of the age. Masters of arms like the Italian Fior dei Liberi did not just teach swordplay, they taught a brutal science of anatomy and leverage. Their illustrated manuscripts show techniques that look more like a deadly dance than a brawl. A knight would be taught to close the distance, grapple his opponent, and use his own weapon as a lever to control the enemy's movements, creating a momentary opening to slide a dagger into one of these fatal gaps. This required immense courage and cool-headedness to step inside the reach of a heavily armed opponent and execute a move with surgical precision. This constant awareness of their own weaknesses fundamentally shaped how knights fought. They were not reckless juggernauts but highly disciplined and mobile combatants. Their training emphasized constant movement, a strong defensive posture, and the use of their armor's deflective surfaces to protect their vulnerable areas. A knight always kept his elbows tucked in, his visor angled to deflect a direct thrust, and his footing secure to prevent a fall. The very existence of these vulnerabilities meant that skill, not just the quality of the steel, remained the ultimate determinant of survival. The psychological weight of knowing where you were vulnerable and that your enemy knew it too created a battlefield where vigilance was as important as valor. That polished steel fortress was only as strong as the soft foundation it rested upon. Beneath the gleaming plates and behind every articulated joint lay the true unsung heroes of the entire system, the padded gambeson and the flexible mail gussets. The gambeson was not a simple undershirt but a thick, deeply quilted jacket, often stuffed with layers of raw wool or scrap linen. This humble garment served multiple life-saving purposes. Its primary job was to act as a shock absorber. When a war hammer struck a breastplate, the gambeson's padding cushioned the brutal impact, spreading the force across a wider area to prevent the steel itself from being driven into the knight's flesh, causing severe bruising or even broken bones. Beyond cushioning, it was a vital layer of insulation, protecting the skin from the searing heat of the sun-baked metal in summer and the biting cold in winter. It also absorbed sweat, a constant and uncomfortable reality of combat, helping to prevent chafing and rust from forming on the inside of the steel plates. But its role did not end there. In areas where plate coverage was absent, such as the upper thighs or the back of the legs, the gambeson itself became the final line of defense, a surprisingly resilient barrier against slashing attacks. Meanwhile, at the critical gaps in the plate armor, another layer came into play. Sewn directly into the arming doublet, the garment worn over the gambeson to which the plates were strapped, were patches of chainmail known as gussets. These were strategically placed at the armpits, the inner elbows, and the backs of the knees. A solid steel plate at the shoulder joint would have made it impossible to raise a sword. The mail gusset solved this, offering flexible, mesh-like protection that moved seamlessly with the body, shielding the vulnerable arteries and tendons there from a thrusting blade or arrow. This created a perfect, layered system of redundancy. The plate deflected or stopped the initial blow, the mail gusset protected the gaps the plate could not cover, and the gambeson absorbed the residual energy and impact. The entire harness was a single, integrated machine. A poorly made or ill-fitting gambeson would render the most expensive suit of plate armor nearly useless, causing constant discomfort, restricting movement, and failing to properly cushion blows. To focus only on the shining steel is to admire a magnificent cathedral while completely ignoring the deep, essential stonework of its foundation. The name Lawrence Helmschmidt was whispered in royal courts with the same reverence as that of a great painter or architect. As the principal armorer to Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian I, Helmschmidt did not merely make armor, he engineered a king's identity in steel. His workshop in Augsburg produced harnesses that were the pinnacle of the German Gothic style, characterized by their elegant fluting and breathtaking precision. For Maximilian, a ruler obsessed with chivalric ideals and his own public image, Helmschmidt created suits that were both defensive marvels and powerful propaganda. The armor was designed to make the emperor appear taller, broader, and more imposing, a living statue of imperial authority. This was not a simple transaction between a craftsman and a client. It was a deep, collaborative partnership. Helmschmidt would have known the emperor's exact measurements, his fighting style, and even the way he carried himself in the saddle. The armorer was a confidant, entrusted with the literal safety and symbolic representation of the most powerful man in the realm. In Milan, another dynasty of smiths reached a similar legendary status. The Missaglia family workshop became a brand name for quality, their products exported to nobles across Europe. For generations, they refined the robust Milanese style, perfecting the rounded, glancing surfaces that could turn a lance strike. A knight ordering a harness from the Missaglia knew he was acquiring the best defense money could buy, a suit that was as much a financial investment as a martial one. The relationship between these masters and their elite patrons fueled an incredible period of artistic expression. A battle harness was no longer just polished metal. It could be a canvas for intricate etchings depicting saints or mythological scenes, shimmering with delicate gilding, or embossed with three-dimensional roping and fluting. These decorative elements were not added as an afterthought. They were integral to the design, celebrating the Renaissance fusion of art and science. To see this legacy today, you can stand before their work in museums like the Kunsthistorisches Museum in Vienna. There, Helmschmidt's armor for Maximilian is not a relic in a glass case, but a conversation across centuries. You can see the perfect alignment of the plates, the masterful articulation of the knee cops, and the subtle etchings that catch the light. These pieces prove that the drive for survival on the battlefield was forever intertwined with a deeper, more human desire for beauty, identity, and legacy. The blacksmith's anvil was not just a place to hammer steel, it was a forge for history itself. A knight's harness was a masterpiece on the battlefield, but a nightmare to transport. This mobile fortress did not travel on the knight's back. It moved as a carefully managed cargo, a logistical puzzle that demanded its own specialized support system. The true key to a knight's readiness was not just his courage, but the skill and dedication of his squire. This young man was far more than a simple servant. He was a technician, a bodyguard, and a quartermaster rolled into one. His most critical daily duty was the maintenance of the steel shell. After a day's march through rain or mud, or the utter chaos of a battle, the squire's work began. He would meticulously disassemble the harness piece by piece. Each plate had to be scrubbed clean of mud, blood, and moisture, then thoroughly dried. Any hint of dampness left on the metal would invite the insidious creep of rust, a red cancer that could weaken the finest steel and create a fatal weak point. Once clean and dry, every surface was carefully rubbed with a light coat of oil or grease, creating a protective barrier against the elements. This was not a weekly chore, it was a daily ritual of survival. The process of dressing for war was itself a complex procedure that could not be rushed. A knight could not simply step into his armor. With his squire's assistance, the donning sequence was a methodical, layered affair that could take half an hour or more. It began with the padded gambeson, then the chainmail gussets and arming doublet. The steel plates were then strapped on in a specific order, starting with the legs, then the torso, and finally the arms, with the squire ensuring every buckle was secure and every articulation moved freely. This was not something a man could do for himself. It was a testament to a deep, practiced partnership. For travel, the disassembled armor was packed with similar care. It was not tossed into a sack. Specialized leather bags and sturdy wooden chests, often lined with fabric, were used to transport the different components, preventing them from clattering together and becoming dented or scratched. A wealthy knight would often have a dedicated pack horse, a vital member of his retinue whose sole purpose was to carry this immensely valuable cargo. This immense logistical tail meant that an army's striking power was directly tied to the size and efficiency of its support staff. 100 knights on the march might require 200 or 300 non-combatants, squires, grooms, and carters, all dedicated to keeping the fighting men and their equipment battle-ready. The image of a lone, independent knight is a romantic myth. In reality, he was the apex of a small, mobile industry, a disciplined enterprise where the clank of the armorer's hammer was as important as the clash of swords. That gleaming steel shell eventually outlived the battlefields it was built for, but its true conquest was just beginning. It migrated from the muddy fields of war into the very heart of culture, becoming an enduring symbol of nobility, virtue, and power. In the formal language of heraldry, the figure of the knight in full plate became the default avatar for a noble lineage. When you look at a coat of arms, the crest and shield are often accompanied by a helmet, and resting upon it, the full figure of an armored knight. This was not a casual choice. It communicated that the family's honor was rooted in martial courage and chivalric duty, values physically embodied by the plate harness. This symbolic shorthand was so powerful that it persists on official insignia and corporate logos even today, a direct link to an age when a man's identity was literally forged in steel. Renaissance artists understood this symbolic power perfectly. Painters like Albrecht Dürer and Titian did not depict armor as a mere accessory. They rendered it with photorealistic detail, capturing the way light glinted off a polished pauldron or the subtle blue-gray hue of tempered steel. In a portrait, a suit of magnificent armor did more than just protect the subject. It proclaimed their immense wealth, their political authority, and their connection to a heroic, chivalric past. The armor itself became a character in the painting, speaking a silent language of strength and stability that every viewer could understand. This cultural coding is even more vivid in the literature of the era. In the romances of Chrétien de Troyes, a knight is scarcely introduced without a lavish description of his harness. The specific narrative of his armor, its craftsmanship, and its heraldic devices was essential to establishing his identity and moral standing. These literary descriptions were not just filler, they were a way for the audience to visually place the hero within a social and ethical hierarchy. The most powerful testament to this transformation is the legend of King Arthur. Though the historical figure would have worn mail, our modern imagination invariably clothes him and his knights in brilliant, anachronistic plate armor. This was a conscious choice by later storytellers, who reached for the most potent visual symbol of knighthood available to them, the full plate harness. It represented an ideal, a state of perfected, invulnerable virtue. In this way, the armor transcended its physical form. It ceased to be mere equipment and became a powerful metaphor. It stood for the resilience of the human spirit, the idea that honor could be a defense as strong as steel, and that true nobility was something worn on the inside, even as it was displayed for all to see on the outside. This archetypal knight, sealed in his shining shell, became a timeless figure, forever ready to face the dragons of his age. A cannonball does not care about your noble bloodline. The thunderous arrival of gunpowder weapons on European battlefields introduced a force that plate armor was never designed to withstand. Early hand cannons and arquebuses were clumsy, slow to reload, and wildly inaccurate. Yet at close range, the heavy lead ball they fired carried a shocking amount of raw kinetic energy. It did not need to slice or pierce with a sharp point. It simply smashed through the steel plate, turning the knight's greatest asset into a deadly shrapnel hazard. The psychological impact was as devastating as the physical one. For the first time, a common soldier could be trained in weeks to wield a weapon that could kill the most expensively equipped and highly trained warrior on the field from a distance. The very foundation of aristocratic military dominance was cracking. Armorers fought back with sheer mass. They began producing specialized heavy breastplates known as proofed armor. These were brutally thick plates, often marked with a distinctive proof mark near the point of impact from a manufacturer's test shot. Wearing one of these was like carrying a personal shield of solid steel. But this solution created an impossible problem. A proofed cuirass alone could weigh as much as an entire field harness from a century before. While it might stop a pistol ball, the knight inside was transformed into a near-immobile statue, exhausted long before he could ever reach the enemy lines. The tactical calculus of warfare underwent a brutal, pragmatic shift. Commanders realized it was far more cost-effective to equip 100 peasants with cheap muskets than to fund a single knight in his increasingly obsolete steel shell. The massed volleys of these unarmored musketeers could shred a charging cavalry unit long before it made contact. This was the true revolution, a social one as much as a military one. The battlefield was no longer the exclusive domain of the noble elite. The common soldier, armed with a simple tube of iron and a pouch of black powder, had arrived. The age of plate armor did not fade away because of a better blade or a sharper arrowhead. its reign was ended by the invisible, unstoppable force of an explosion, a fundamental change in the physics of conflict that no amount of polished steel could ever hope to contain. The Knight Steel Fortress did not vanish overnight. Instead, it underwent a slow, pragmatic transformation, shedding weight and coverage in a calculated retreat from the age of gunpowder. The iconic full-plate harness gave way to a new, more practical standard for the battlefield, the three-quarter plate. Imagine a suit that protected the head, the entire torso, and the thighs, but left the lower legs and feet unarmored. This was not a compromise born of poverty, but a deliberate tactical choice. By removing the heavy greaves and sabatons, a cavalryman gained significant freedom of movement and reduced the crushing fatigue that could decide a long engagement. This style found its ultimate expression in a new breed of warrior, the cuirassier. These heavy cavalrymen of the 16th and 17th centuries were the direct descendants of medieval knights, yet they were equipped for a completely different kind of war. Their core defense was pared down to its absolute essentials: a thick, bulletproof cuirass for the torso and a sturdy, close-fitting helmet, typically a burgonet or a morion. Why these two pieces? Because in an era of muskets and pistols, the torso and head remained the most likely targets for a fatal shot. The rest of the body was often protected by nothing more than a heavy buff coat, a garment made of waxed leather that was surprisingly resilient against slashing swords and could even slow a pistol ball, though it offered little against a direct musket shot. Some cuirassiers added armored gauntlets or thigh pieces, but many rode into battle with their arms and lower legs completely unprotected. This shift reflected a cold, hard calculation, a recognition that complete immunity was no longer possible. The goal was no longer to stop every blow, but to maximize the chance of survival for the most vital organs while retaining the mobility needed to be an effective soldier. The cuirassier represents the final, streamlined evolution of the armored warrior. He was a fusion of old and new, a symbol of chivalry's last stand adapted for the age of volley fire and the organized state-funded army. His existence proves that armor never truly disappeared. It simply evolved, focusing its protection where it mattered most in a world where a single, unseen shot could now end a life from across the field. The cold, silent testimony of the earth often speaks louder than any chronicle. Our understanding of this technological leap is constantly being refined by archaeology, which uncovers tangible evidence written in iron and bone. The wreck of the Mary Rose, King Henry VIII's great warship, offers a remarkable time capsule from the year 1545. When this warship sank, it took a complete arsenal to the seabed, preserving a snapshot of military technology in a state of dramatic transition. Within the hull, archaeologists found both sleek plate armor for the officers and heavier, older suits of mail for the Marines, showing that the two technologies coexisted for generations. The ship's very cargo reveals the messy, overlapping reality of how armies were actually equipped, a far cry from the neat timelines we might imagine. But for a starker, more brutal perspective, we must turn to a field on the island of Gotland. There, the mass graves from the Battle of Visby, fought in 1361, present a grisly but invaluable record. The skeletons of farmers and townsfolk, hastily conscripted to defend their city, were buried still wearing their coat of plates and chainmail. These were not the glorious knights of legend, but common men clad in the best protection they could muster, and the armor itself tells the story of their final moments. You can see the specific, fatal failures, a coat of plates that stopped a slash to the ribs but could not prevent a devastating poleaxe blow to the leg, or a mail coif that was utterly pierced by a bodkin arrow. These finds allow historians to move beyond paintings and poems to study the construction methods, the wear patterns from long use, and the horrifying battle damage on the actual objects that saw combat. Each rusted rivet and fractured bone adds another piece to the puzzle, helping us understand not just how the armor was made, but how it was worn, how it was fought in, and precisely how it failed under the extreme pressures of a medieval battlefield. Archaeology gives a direct, unflinching voice to the past, telling the human story of this transformation not in ink, but in corroded iron and skeletal remains. The legacy of these steel suits is not locked away in dusty museums alone. It is being forged anew in practice halls and on reenactment fields across the world, kept alive by a passionate global community. Historical European martial arts, or HEMA, has transformed the study of medieval combat from theoretical speculation into a rigorous physical science. Practitioners do not simply read the intricate illustrations in manuals by masters like Fior de Libri. They painstakingly reconstruct the techniques, feeling the movements in their own bodies. They learn how to grapple with an opponent, how to use a longsword's point to find the gap in a visor, and precisely how much force is required to hook a leg with a poleaxe. This practical research provides invaluable, tangible data on the armor's true capabilities and its deliberate weaknesses, answering questions that centuries of academic study could only guess at. Meanwhile, dedicated reenactors and master armorers collaborate to create stunningly accurate, fully functional reproductions of historical harnesses. Wearing 45 pounds of hand-forged steel in the summer sun is a brutal lesson in history. These modern knights experience the suffocating heat, the exhausting weight, and the constant metallic clamor that was the soundtrack of a medieval warrior's life. But they also rediscover the incredible mobility, the way the balanced weight allows them to roll, sprint, and climb, shattering the myth of the clumsy knight for a new generation. This hands-on revival does more than just debunk old stories. It provides a visceral, gut-level understanding of the past that no book can ever convey. You do not just learn that a knight could move, you feel the plates shift and slide with your own stride. You do not just read about the importance of a gambeson, you feel its life-saving cushioning when a training weapon connects with your breastplate. The dedication of these enthusiasts ensures that this profound knowledge is not lost, but is instead passed on as a living, breathing experience, transforming our understanding of history from a passive observation into a dynamic, unforgettable conversation with the past. That polished steel shell eventually outlived the battlefields it was built for, but its true conquest was just beginning. It migrated from the muddy fields of war into the very heart of culture, becoming an enduring symbol of nobility, virtue, and power. In the formal language of heraldry, the figure of the knight in full plate became the default avatar for a noble lineage. When you look at a coat of arms, the crest and shield are often accompanied by a helmet, and resting upon it, the full figure of an armored knight. This was not a casual choice. It communicated that the family's honor was rooted in martial courage and chivalric duty, values physically embodied by the plate harness. This symbolic shorthand was so powerful that it persists on official insignia and corporate logos even today, a direct link to an age when a man's identity was literally forged in steel. Renaissance artists understood this symbolic power perfectly. Painters like Albrecht Dürer and Titian did not depict armor as a mere accessory. They rendered it with photorealistic detail, capturing the way light glinted off a polished pauldron or the subtle blue-gray hue of tempered steel. In a portrait, a suit of magnificent armor did more than just protect the subject. It proclaimed their immense wealth, their political authority, and their connection to a heroic, chivalric past. The armor itself became a character in the painting, speaking a silent language of strength and stability that every viewer could understand. This cultural coding is even more vivid in the literature of the era. In the romances of Chrétien de Troyes, a knight is scarcely introduced without a lavish description of his harness. The specific narrative of his armor, its craftsmanship, and its heraldic devices was essential to establishing his identity and moral standing. These literary descriptions were not just filler, They were a way for the audience to visually place the hero within a social and ethical hierarchy. The most powerful testament to this transformation is the legend of King Arthur. Though the historical figure would have worn mail, our modern imagination invariably clothes him and his knights in brilliant, anachronistic plate armor. This was a conscious choice by later storytellers, who reached for the most potent visual symbol of knighthood available to them, the full plate harness. It represented an ideal, a state of perfected, invulnerable virtue. In this way, the armor transcended its physical form. It ceased to be mere equipment and became a powerful metaphor. It stood for the resilience of the human spirit, the idea that honor could be a defense as strong as steel, and that true nobility was something worn on the inside, even as it was displayed for all to see on the outside. This archetypal knight, sealed in his shining shell, became a timeless figure, forever ready to face the dragons of his age. A nobleman's life became a far more valuable commodity once he was encased in steel. We can trace this transformation not through perfect statistics, but through the shifting narratives of the chroniclers themselves. In the chaotic aftermath of battles like Agincourt or the earlier fights of the 100 Years' War, a telling pattern emerges from the records. High-ranking knights and lords, the ones outfitted in the finest Milanese or Gothic plate, are consistently described not as lying among the dead, but as being taken prisoner. Their names are meticulously listed among those to be ransomed, a transaction that turned a defeated warrior into a lucrative asset. Why was this happening? Because killing such a man had become incredibly difficult. A knight in a full harness could weather a storm of blows that would have slaughtered a lesser protected soldier. He became a walking fortress, and storming that fortress to deliver a killing blow was a protracted, dangerous process that many enemies simply avoided in the heat of a larger battle. It was far safer and far more profitable to surround him, exhaust him, and force his surrender. His armor made him worth more alive than dead. This reality created a stark class divide on the battlefield. For the common infantryman, the archer in his padded jack, or the knight who could not afford the latest defense, the battlefield remained a slaughterhouse. Their mortality rates stayed devastatingly high. A single, well-placed arrow or a sweeping polearm strike could easily end their lives, as their armor could not reliably turn a direct hit. The difference in survival was not just about skill, it was a brutal equation of metallurgy and wealth. The very nature of the injuries sustained tells its own story. For a knight in plate, a fatal wound was rarely a clean slash across the chest or a spear through the torso. Instead, his injuries were far more specific and required deliberate effort to inflict. He was more likely to suffer from the concussive effect of a mace blow, which might leave him stunned and vulnerable to a dagger thrust into a visor slit. Or he might suffer a deep, disabling cut to the back of the knee once he was wrestled to the ground. The armor forced attackers to become surgeons of violence, targeting the tiny, unforgiving gaps in an otherwise impenetrable system. This fundamental shift in survival odds transformed aristocratic warfare into a more calculated, almost financial, enterprise. The immense investment in a custom harness was, for the nobility, the soundest investment they could make. It was an insurance policy written in tempered steel, one that directly purchased a higher probability of seeing their lands and lineages continue. The battlefield for them became less a roll of the dice and more a managed risk, a dangerous game where the house odds were now firmly in their favor. A knight's polished steel harness was not the only answer to the ancient problem of survival. Across the globe, in cultures separated by vast oceans and divergent traditions, the same fundamental challenge sparked its own unique technological revolutions. While European smiths were perfecting their full-body exoskeletons, Japanese armorers were achieving a similar goal with a completely different philosophy. The samurai's armor, known as yoroi, was a masterpiece of laminar construction. Imagine hundreds of small, lacquered leather or iron plates called kosane, meticulously laced together with vibrant silk cords. This was not a rigid shell, but a flexible, almost organic suit that moved with the wearer like a second skin. Its design was perfectly tailored to the samurai's primary role as a mounted archer. The broad, shoulder-like sword protected him from arrows while allowing his arms complete freedom to draw a bow, and the open-faced kabuto helmet offered superior visibility and ventilation during long campaigns in Japan's humid climate. This was armor built for mobility and endurance, a direct response to the tactical demands of its environment. Far to the west, the elite cavalry of the Ottoman Empire, the Sipahi, adopted a different kind of hybrid defense. Their armor of choice was often the sisak, a brilliant fusion of chainmail and small, overlapping steel plates. This system offered the best of both worlds, the flexibility of mail for a rider who needed to twist and draw a saber, reinforced with rigid plates at the chest, back, and shoulders to deflect the heaviest blows. This was not an isolated innovation. The renowned Mamluk warriors of Egypt used strikingly similar composite armors, layering plates over mail to create a defense that was both resilient and practical for the deserts of the Near East. These parallel developments are not a mere curiosity, they are a profound statement. From the lacquered leather of Japan to the steel-plated mail of the Ottomans, the drive to integrate rigid plates for enhanced protection was a universal arms race. The European full-plate harness stands as one spectacular, highly specialized solution, but it was far from the only one. Every culture, facing its own unique combination of enemies, terrain, and weapons, engineered its own version of a perfect defense, proving that the will to survive is a force that forges its own tools, no matter where in the world it takes root. The journey from chainmail to plate armor was more than a simple upgrade. It was a complete reinvention of survival itself. This transformation stands as one of the most profound technological and cultural shifts of the entire medieval era. It was a revolution sparked by brutal necessity, hammered into existence on the anvils of war, and perfected by the genius of master armorers whose names we still remember. This evolution fundamentally rewrote the rules of who lived and who died in combat, but its impact reached far beyond the battlefield. The rise of plate armor reshaped the very foundations of society, reinforcing feudal hierarchies by making elite survival a purchasable commodity. It fueled specialized economies centered around legendary workshops and redirected the flow of vast fortunes. It became a new canvas for artistic expression, with steel serving as a medium for breathtaking etchings and sculptural forms. The iconic knight in shining plate armor is therefore so much more than a historical soldier. He is a lasting symbol of a distant world, a powerful testament to human ingenuity's relentless drive to overcome even the most immediate mortal dangers. As we look back on this incredible story of innovation, it invites us to ponder the ways we are redefining survival in our own era. What modern challenges are pushing us to create our own revolutionary shields? If you have enjoyed this exploration of how the past built its future, we would be grateful if you subscribed for more journeys into history. We would also love to hear your thoughts on this transformative period in the comments below.